All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome, committee members. Scott, John, council member, appreciate having you here. Today's meeting, I think, will be relatively short, just now that the tentative budget has been approved. Wanted to meet with the committee again and see if there are any additional recommendations or thoughts that the committee might have. But let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you'll all stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. My thought for today is just thank you all for participating. The city runs better when we have citizens who are willing to show up and give their part, do their part.
And lob good grenades.
Yeah, well, and softballs, hardballs, sliders, whatever is necessary.
Shakes things up. Honestly, I appreciate that.
It's good. So my thought in item number 1 in the agenda is reviewing the subcommittee recommendations that we had made previously in the year. Are there any recommendations that the committee has to add to those?
I want to follow up on the initial recommendations. I mean, did the council agree with it? Did they decide to go with it? Did they?
You want to go? I've got them all right here. Do you want to just go through them and?
Oh, yeah.
Let's do that. Okay, so let's start with the very first meeting on first recommendations we made on April 8th. One of the first item was that we recommended a contractual time commitment from city employees receiving training worth $1,000 or more. John, council member, is that?
We had agreed that would be a good thing.
Has that been put into policy or is it in process? I can give you these, John, if you want.
We are, we've been trying to evaluate those that need it for their job. Most of them don't have $1,000 as opposed to those, so that we're evaluating who's in that category of $1,000 more. With police, it has been implemented. But I'm not sure if anyone else crosses that line for $1,000 or more at this point.
Is that an issue with other folks?
I mean, we've talked about it with other issues, not just training, but where it's kind of been like we've invested money in something. A good example is some folks get a uniform allowance, and if they leave too soon after they get the new uniform allowance, then we take them back and things like that. So, but we have done it, especially with police. We put 2 or 3 employees through the academy, and then they gave us a commitment.
Okay. I know that you've been looking at ways to identify revenue streams a little more clearly on the yellow sheets. So we'll check that one off. Discussions on how to better, more clearly label year-end unspent budget.
We have not implemented anything yet. I have not talked to Peter about it yet.
Okay.
So I will, because
we have a new finance director, so.
At least he had the right uniform on.
Are they gonna make the playoffs this year? For what they spend, we oughta.
But I think on that point, I think it's good to know, and I think it's in the audit committee. In fact, I did a deep dive on that to see from year to year what last year was pretty close, but the previous years sometimes it was pretty extreme how much we had, I say, left on the table, but that we're not
that wasn't spent.
Was saved. Yeah. And that's a good thing. And I think that when we hit that, when we do that, or either way, just at the end say, hey, this is where we're at. And I think you can probably count on one hand how many people have gone to the audit committee meetings that went through that for like 5 years straight. So I mean, I don't know how to make that more readily to say that, but
it's a discussion that's being held. It's being looked at.
Yeah, at least at the level of it.
We know the pay for use, the pay to play philosophy is being discussed across the board.
How's it being accepted at the city level? Council level,
Increase the fees on the pool. I mean, that was pretty across the board.
is it break even for the number that
Getting
the
there.
director said?
I mean, and that's the thing that year to year, it's kind of difficult to see because you don't know what's,
Is
I
it
mean,
the
like the
number that
weather.
Pool director said to get you to break even 1150, I believe. was the
No.
number?
No, that finance
That
recommended
was-
that last year and we're at 950 instead of 1150.
But they are looking for other revenue streams
Why didn't
inside
we
the
go to
pool
1150 on that?
because we're trying to do it incrementally.
It's been how many years? And we're-
Two.
Oh,
We
how
raised
long
it
have
last year and then
how
we're,
long have we had the pool, we're still
Oh,
not
that's-
break even, guys, come on, guys.
you got to give me some credit for it.
I'm giving you
Okay.
some credit, but
No,
the
agree.
folks that have been here longer.
Yes, I have this argument with my wife all the time.
And this was one of the things that I was gonna bring up
Okay.
today also. In the council meeting, when you all discussed that, I remember you saying how it bothered you to sit there and think about, because it was, you had discussed that and then you discussed the roads issue with increasing like utility bills or having whatever. And you said how much it bothered you to think about an older person sitting at home trying to figure out what they were gonna not get that month to pay that. And I remember when you said that, I remembered sitting there thinking, and there were people up there sitting next to you who said, oh, well, we can't charge people $11.50 to go to the pool. If they go to the pool, that's a choice and they're definitely getting something for it. And they should be feeling the same way you feel about this older person on a fixed income trying to figure out what they're gonna do without this month to pay that. And the people going to the, and even a lot of them don't even live in this city, so they're not even faced with that other
Sure.
thing. That was my thing. It's like, I understand you have to have certain things in the city for people to do, but
Is the pool a have to? And I think that's your point.
yeah,
And I think that's the point
Yeah.
that I think Brian was talking about too, is the
Yeah.
fact that at some point, it is the city is agreeing to subsidize a want. And I think that's where we're at. And I think that's at this point, the council says the pool is viable.
yeah.
And I
yeah.
think
Well, I think that's.
it's getting closer, but and the thing is that if we're putting in 1.56 something, whatever, plus more for playground equipment into the pool, and that's gonna be needed in 15 more years, we're basically throwing it down to the, people 15 years from now. Hey, guess what? You're gonna have to come up with this much more money to replace valves and liners and et cetera, because they fail. And, will the pool be viable in the next 2 or 3 years, maybe 5? I would say it's probably in that venue, because if you're replacing valves that are gonna be more energy efficient, if you're using a better liner system, it's gonna be better probably in the short term, but once you get past that one bridge point, you're gonna be throwing $100,000 into it. Like Brigham City, like, was it Clearfield, Roy, somebody over there doing the same thing.
Mhm.
We have to make a conscious decision to do that. And I think that's the point.
850 to 950, who was against raising it to 1150?
I don't know.
Did
I
they
don't
give a
remember.
reason?
Did they give a reason?
Yeah.
Yeah, they
What-
don't want to raise it that fast, that high. That's the reason.
$3 is that fast, that high. Have we gone through the numbers and said, look, we've been losing money on this silly thing for 20+ years? I mean, is
I
this,
think every one of them knows that the city's losing money on it.
Printed it
every
out.
month, And they're
The
still,
show.
we're still, okay.
yeah,
I
that's,
think
and that's why I think that's something, whenever you get up and speak to them, I think maybe we should consider just saying, we want to go back and re-emphasize that you all seriously look at, oh, okay.
I've got it written down already.
Okay,
Yeah, so
Phil's response
sorry, I
back
didn't.
on that,
what's that?
your response back on that Facebook site
Yes,
this past week was spot on.
Which
Yeah.
one?
The one talking about the pool and the increased entry fee.
What do they,
There
with their?
was a citizen that questioned it and you responded back to him. Did they reach back out to you?
No.
Separately? I think that was perfect. That explains exactly why it's gone up, the way it likely will continue to go up.
Well, yeah, and that's some of the discussion that we've had here and some of the discussion, quite frankly, to council's credit, that has been heard and seen on council. It's the mechanism of excuse me, our legislative body that right now the vote is swung in the not to raise it as much as fast.
Mhm.
That can always change, but it doesn't mean that we can't reemphasize to council as a committee that we feel that more of an increase would be appropriate. There's a lot that council has to consider in making that decision. So I've got that as one of the comments that I don't know if I'll be making comments tonight or if it'll be next week, John, the next meeting.
Budget would be next week, but you can
It'll be,
comment
no,
tonight.
okay. Whatever works out. We did investigate the use of seized vehicles for the motor, for the police motor pool. And only the state police get to do that.
Yeah.
Was there any exploration? I think there was some surface exploration of, solid waste co-bidding with Pleasant View.
Yeah,
since they use
we're
the
gonna,
same
next
provider.
year's is when we go out to bid. So
Okay.
come December, we're gonna look at, trying to align our, the timeframes when our contracts expire with our neighboring cities so that we could potentially do it all as one.
Okay. And so you
We've
opened
talked
up
with-
that conversation with them?
Yeah.
When do they expire?
Pleasant Views is actually, I think, 3 or 4 years out. And then Harrisville, we didn't talk to them yet. We've only talked with, Pleasant View Public Works.
I know there's been conversation about opt-in program, other curbside options for recycling. As far as I understand, recycling is still cost prohibitive. It costs more than,
But if you have a person that wants it, there should be, I think in the RFP, that there's something that says, what is the minimum number you need for an opt-in thing where somebody gets a special can and pays $50 a month, something crazy, but because they want to recycle. I've had many people say, hey, I want to recycle. I don't care what the cost. I'm like, holy cow.
I think they'll change, their mind will change because when Reese used to work for Republic Services, I talked to him about kind of an opt-in program that was a number of years ago. And he said, what you have to remember is they still have to drive every street on every route on recycling day, which means the base cost is gonna be the same. And whether you've got one person
Mhm.
or you've got 6,000 that you're picking up. So, that person who says, I'll pay whatever, may change their mind when it's, $300 per week to have their recycling picked up because that's the cost to get the truck to their place. But at least that conversation is happening. And then the big one that's been on everybody's radar has been roads, exploring options to increase funding. That's a big topic of discussion at the council meeting tonight with, I think council.
I stirred the pot.
Council, talking about a large property tax increase. I believe that's the direction the council is heading, rather than a fee.
I'd like to follow up on that because previous discussions, I was told, go out and ask around, see if people would like fees versus the property tax increase.
And they did a thingy on
I did a thingy on it.
it. Flash.
Flash.
Okay. And
Interesting.
because everybody I've talked to has said the same thing. They've all said a fee that goes directly to the roads. What is
And
flash vote?
Flash vote said increase my property tax, but it was pretty close to the other, which said don't do anything. But
Yeah.
it's one of those things that anybody can see that, right?
Yeah.
Look at the result anyway. So, and the comments were pretty stark, meaning like, city, you don't know what you're doing, go figure it out, don't raise my taxes. And, that was kind of the vein of a lot of it. Some of it's ignorant, but, others it was pretty point in fact that, hey, I shouldn't be paying for something that, anyway. But the thing that Phil sent, I thought was very interesting from Far West that had usage, not just a flat rate, but a usage, fee that was applied to, not just, residents, but also businesses. So like, instead of paying $15, Maverick would pay $6,000. And, because it was based on how much traffic that they got in and out of that little spot. And, I'm making up numbers, but that's kind of what was very interesting to me. And I don't know, I'm trying to think how much that study would have cost, but it would cost, but that's something that we can at least look at. I think my mayor yell at me, but my main point was to have a plan instead of just saying, hey, we're gonna go do this to the maximum ability we can. But also, by the way, we kind of pulled in some money and made it a property tax increase, but yet we didn't use it for roads, and that's,
my
how do-
concern when
how
I
do we-
explained that.
yeah.
How do we tie that so that it doesn't get swept out?
That's
and put
my
somewhere
point.
else?
That's what I wanted to hash out.
That's one of
Back to you as the city
one of the
administrator.
questions that we'll have here in just a little bit, is how are, that I had planned on discussing in a little bit is how are we going to, when I say we, I mean city council, the city, all of us, how are we going to ensure that the revenues that are increased, the increased revenue, sorry, my brain is still a bit of a fog from a cold that I've had. Foggier than usual. How are we going to ensure that those property tax revenues actually go to roads? On the survey, the flash vote on the results on question number 4, how would you want to pay for improvements to streets and sidewalks in North Ogden? 29% said annual property tax increase. 19% increase in utility fees.
Do they understand the difference though? That the property tax goes into a general fund that can be pulled whatever?
I think most residents don't understand.
Okay, because that's what I was gonna come back to. How was the question
But
worded?
technically, all the property tax goes to public safety.
Right.
So that's the thing that I think everything gets shuffled and.
Let me finish
Oh,
up
sorry.
here with these. Wouldn't want to pay more. That was the largest percentage, 32%. And other was 19%. So you have 58%. Is that, was my math right? 48%, 29 and 19. 48% saying we're willing to pay more, just a difference of opinion in how that gets done, in how that happens.
Well, I might say that they're saying if you're going to charge us more, we have a preference.
Yeah,
Cause
yeah, right.
I think there may be some that say, that still in that group would say, don't charge us, right?
Right. I'm just looking at those here that are saying I guess that's what this question would get to.
If,
Yeah.
Is if we're doing it, how would you like to pay for it? Because one of the options was wouldn't want to pay more. They're good enough. So a third of respondents said that they feel like the roads are good enough. So, it's,
The reason I mentioned that is because I have asked probably 30 to 40 people and I've explained what I'm doing here, blah, blah, and every one of them has said, make it a fee so it goes directly to roads. I haven't had one person say, raise the taxes, and I did look at the results of that flash vote. So that's what you're relying on to decide to go with the property tax increase. And the other follow-up on that is last year, which got me started here, you guys did a property tax increase last year. And Severin gave me a pretty nasty lecture about this is gonna fill potholes. And I came in here and I said, how many potholes did you fill? And nothing was filled. So my point is, to me, it's another bait and switch. And that's why, and if I need to go to council and look, guys, you did this last year and I feel like I was lied to. And everybody I'm talking to and explaining to it as clearly as I can is saying, make it a fee that goes directly to roads. I question the flash vote, other than the ones that don't want to increase at all.
the decision that council made up to this point, it happened before flash vote went out. So that,
Okay, so then what were you using to rely on that decision making? That changes the conversation completely. Because
I voted it down, so I voted for B, but
It was
anyway,
just council preference. That they felt like it was better to do the tax and avoid the potential legal implications of a fee as opposed to doing the fee.
I thought the legal implications had already been resolved.
No, there's still a entity out there that's looking to sue the next city. they're not sure, they're gonna cherry pick which city implements a fee will be the next one they attack. So they've already, Libertas has already said that clearly. They're looking for another city to sue.
So is that the reason we're just trying to avoid litigation? I mean, I'm just curious of the conversation.
I don't know what the conversation was, cause I voted
That
for fees,
was
but
part
yeah,
of
that
it,
was part of
I
it, yeah, but I think that,
part of the conversation from council. There
Yeah.
was, I remember one council member stated that, you know, whether it's a fee or it's a tax, it's coming out of the resident's pocket, which is essentially a
Agreed.
tax. So let's just do it as a tax, what it actually is. I think that was the sentiments of those that voted for having it be a property tax increase versus encourage you to come to council meeting and ask that question directly to the council members. And then, you know, council still has the option to make that change. It just have to come and voice your opinion. Yeah,
It can be changed all the way up through the truth and taxation hearing in
all the way up.
August.
That's right.
So then, if they move forward, the question then boils down to who's responsible for making sure that money does go towards roads versus hiring new people and then telling me it went to roads.
So we would, if the council wanted to, we could put it in a restricted fund. It makes the accounting a little more complicated, but it turns to the finance department. Where the council would essentially, or of course, it's hard to do. The council every budget year would have to say, this much money is moving into that restricted fund.
Well, the first thing you gotta do is change the ordinance.
yeah,
Yeah.
Right.
Still have an ordinance that says all property tax goes to public safety. Because we have Liv Satterthwaite complaining like crazy that we were increasing property taxes. But when it's going for public safety, people are a little bit more receptive to that, right? Because public safety is the number one. But if you go with the property tax, you do have to change the ordinance. City council has to change the ordinance because otherwise they can't use it for roads. Because right now it says they have to use it for public safety.
But you just said public safety is for everything, including roads. Did I misunderstand that?
I said that all property tax goes to fund public safety.
But then you're saying that it can't go to roads currently.
Right,
Correct.
no, that's the same thing.
Why are we even having a discussion about raising taxes, saying we're gonna put it toward roads if we can't
Because
do
it
it?
said change, you'd have to
You think
change
that's
the
archaic? Has
ordinance.
that discussion been had? Are we changing the ordinance?
Here's a couple of things too that I think the council considers, and I'm fine with the fee or property tax, okay? It's, to me, it's like Kevin Burns, I think, stood up and said, look,
You're still
it's a
charging.
tax,
Yeah.
right? Because I can't get out of it. It's not based upon usage. But a couple of things just to consider, and I'm almost leaning towards the fee.
I don't know how that's possible. Anyway,
It's possible. Things are possible to change their mind. With the fee, all residents pay the same, right?
Yeah.
Whatever it is. Some can afford to pay the fee, some can't. So it makes it easier to waive for those who legitimately can't pay the fee.
That's an option, that's a thing?
Well, I think it better be because there are people in this community that you tack another $180 a year onto their bill.
Well.
They may not be able to pay it.
They're gonna have the same issue with the property tax increase, aren't they?
Yeah, and you can't, there's a circuit breaker type things on property tax. But on property tax, for instance, you, who can afford to pay more.
You have no idea my finances. I'm currently not working very much, so.
So that's been the case your whole life.
oh boy.
But anyway, those who probably can afford to pay more, literally would pay more because of the assessed value of their home, right? And you do that based upon the assessed value to see how much money you needed. But you can't, it's hard to waive that, but people who can probably afford to pay more would pay more. Some people might pay $5 and some might be 25 based upon the value of their home, but either way, you can. And if it's a fee,
Well,
it's a fee.
here's my take on it. If it's gonna go the property tax route, get that ordinance changed ahead of time. So when you go to the truth and taxation, you can say, look, we changed the ordinance. This is the direction we're going. That way there's not this vagary of, well, we're going to, but we can't yet because we're not you know, the ordinance says, you see what I'm saying? Like,
Mhm.
make it clear and be honest with us. 'Cause I was straight up lied to last year. And I feel like you're partially responsible. You weren't the one that was severing, it was the council. that
My
straight up
fault.
lied to
Okay,
me.
moving on. So that was the past. We're going to the future. No,
But it's a repeat.
I've
That's
got,
my
I've
I know.
got that as number two, the
Pulvers-
Transportation
oh.
Utility Fund. Committee is recommending a fee. Are we agreed on that over a tax? Because last time we were the opposite, quite frankly, as a committee.
Yeah, I'm
It
not.
was 3-to-1
for a
tax
fee,
versus a fee. You
I've
were
been a
fee,
the whole time.
you and I were both taxes.
And I was
And
taxing.
we've,
I haven't.
and you haven't, so you're still as a property tax.
Mhm.
But either way, are churches, schools exempt?
Yeah.
From paying anything?
Yeah.
They will be on the fee of the legislatures. That's one of the conditions they're saying.
They'll end up being excluded, yeah.
So they're excluded from property tax and they will be excluded from
fee.
you know,
And I have on here, Brian.
Yeah.
A note to change the ordinance regarding
fine.
property taxes and public safety.
Yeah, if that's the
We
direction.
get
you wanna
that,
go,
that can be done ahead of
get it taken
the
care of.
August truth and
Yeah.
taxation hearing.
and, no, I would advise Councilmember Pulver to once again propose fee.
tried.
And explain why, what the pros and cons are. I don't think you give up on the fee. I was the kind of the one that suggested property tax out of the chute because I'm a substance over form guy. The substance is it's a tax. You call it whatever you want. But I would, encourage Councilmember Pulver to bring up the fee issue again and to address the pros and cons of it and the need to change the ordinance and
Yeah, and
the
I
problem with getting a restricted account and.
think the fundamental part of the roads in general is, to me, it seemed like, and I wasn't made to offend, but it did seem like and when you talk about it, that's great. There's like 4 people that really understood what happened in the last meeting about what the roads, the final number was, that's gonna be a property tax raise because of roads. Anyways, my point was is
So
that
you're saying you're the only one that didn't understand?
Christina wrote that she didn't understand it either. Anyway, but yeah, but the bottom line is that if we have a plan that says this is what we're gonna do this year, and this is what we're gonna have to do to fix it, you know, in the long run. And even if that changes next year and the year after, at least you have a plan to start so that there's just this random thing. I think one year we picked a number out of the hat because we thought that was what the CPI was gonna be. I don't know. You know, I think anyway, go ahead.
No, I believe, David in the Public Works Department had been working on
Yeah.
identifying those roads that we don't want to fall off the cliff in,
Exactly.
from a repair to a replace, right? That's, I think, the most critical right at the moment, is making sure that we reduce or eliminate those roads that right now can be repaired from degrading to the point where now we have to replace them at
I actually wrote something.
exponentially more cost. And so I think that would be part of the plan that we
Well, and he had
recommend.
done that, Phil, that's how we arrived at 3 million,
Right.
is as you'll recall, they prepared a map that showed.
Yep.
With all the colors in it,
When we
right?
did that hayride.
And then, yeah, and we went out, we looked at came back and originally we talked about 5 million, if you'll recall. And then we said to David, your challenge is to come back and tell us really how much you can oversee and how much you need to do the repair versus the replace,
Right.
because it's so much more expensive. That's when he came back and said, I can do it for 3 million. Right? So now if we want specific roads, David can probably do that, but it's hard to, you know, when you bid it out, which roads you're gonna do, but the fact of the matter is, to Councilmember Pulver's point, is we probably got a $50 million deficit down there.
If not more.
And Dave says he thinks it's 50, but
For everything?
see, I like this, it's like council,
To
mayor,
get us up to a 10-year life expectancy.
it's like Russ Porter's stuff on, just remember one thing. Those on the council, the mayor, they won a popularity contest, and that's it. They didn't win anything else but a popularity contest. And that's why.
They didn't pass any functional budget committee.
That's why we have, you know, department heads, et cetera, but, if this committee wants specific identified roads, but, you know, the kind of broad plan we talked about, was the fact that, in fact, I almost remember the words, I feel sorry for the next mayor and council. Because there won't be the 900,000 there in the transportation utility fee. We know that $15 isn't enough to cover it. And all the other things that are on top of that. But I think the original thought process, right or wrong, was that the transportation utility fee or property tax, whatever they decided, would have to be raised at least enough to cover the shortfall that wouldn't be available from the transportation utility fee, which is what, John, about 900?
Yeah. Yeah.
Just calling you back into earth, you were kind of spacing out there.
No, yeah, it's right around that 900 grand.
900 grand, because it won't be there. And if we think 3 million is the number, plus, as Chris brought up, inflation, we know that B and C road funds are pretty stable, about the same.
Stagnant, right?
Yeah, that's a good word.
Yeah,
Stagnant.
they have been for a long time.
They're stagnant.
And these people are
And you know-
driving electric cars around.
You're setting them out, right? Which is the fee or property tax. So you've got at least $1 million to make up for roads next week. Chris did bring up the fact of a general obligation bond as a potential. I think we indicated, with John's help, that the citizens probably wouldn't pass a general obligation bond, but you can see in this study, they're basically saying, do nothing, right? But if you're gonna do something, do this. But the problem is, you probably couldn't get it passed, and if you passed one for 25 million, just throwing out a number, and basically you wouldn't use that money for 8 years. And interest rates on municipal bonds are probably a little bit high right now, so you wouldn't have a positive arbitrage. But those are the things, and Chris has always said this, the next council can come in and change whatever this council decides to do, right? You can lay out, but the last I heard is one council can't commit for the next council. They've got their own. There's certain things like.
You can't force them to make a future decision. But they're, under the state rules, the fee is limited, and it basically, the fee has to go into a restricted fund. It automatically goes into a roads only fund.
So John, if we got sued.
You can bring
say
that up
the
as part of
council
your
doesn't fee. And we get
re-recommendation.
sued, would they issue an injunction to prevent us from collecting the fee?
They could. They asked for one, when they sued Pleasant Grove and the court denied it.
But they could ask for one, right? And if it was granted, we have no money to collect I guess we could immediately go to a property tax.
Yeah, you could do that in the next budget cycle, is do a
So
property
you
tax.
might go a year or so without having funding for roads.
There's a little gambit.
Put some of those over the cliff.
Yeah.
Just information, whatever the council wants to do. Those are the considerations I think need to be discussed.
Okay, so let's go ahead. Yes.
So at this pace, with the amount they're proposing with the fee or the property tax increase, how many years would it take to get all the roads done that need to be done?
Never catch up.
Never.
No, they'll never.
Yeah.
So to get everything to a 20-year lifespan right now, we're just over 100 million. Is that correct?
That was their number. Dave thinks it's probably really 50, just
Okay. So
conservatively
50
saying,
million. If we collect an additional $1 million a year and we have $50 million looking at us, that's 50 years just to get done what needs to be done today without any degradation over time.
And none of them are
You
gonna.
got 3 million, Bill. Cause you'll always have the B and C road funds, right?
Right, we've got 900,000 there, an additional $1 million
And the
in
property tax.
property tax, so that's a couple million there.
And then, if the target, whatever the council decides, if the target's 3 million, or if it's 3.5, the difference has to be made up either in increasing the fee or increasing the property tax
Again,
again.
right,
But the target is 3 million-ish, depending on inflation. So at that case, you might get on that rotational variance in 20 years.
maybe.
I'm gonna agree with you on that. You're never gonna catch up.
Because, yeah, depending on inflation, but you would be able to maintain, you wouldn't hit the.
With no inflation, who knows
Yeah.
what the next pandemic-like emergency is
Yeah.
that throws the economy in a tailspin.
Yeah.
You don't ever catch up.
Yeah.
You're literally just threading things together and kind of holding things together. But at the same time, you see in that flash vote, I thought it was kind of interesting, the results.
How
That-
many participated in the flash vote?
300 and something.
35, yeah, 335.
Which is a pretty good statistical sampling. The, you have a third or more of people who say if it means it's gonna cost me money, don't do anything. So, I mean, and that's part of the difficulty that council faces on a regular basis. That's pretty much how it's split on almost every issue. You have a third who don't want it, you have a third who do want it, and you have a third that don't care. And aren't going to be engaged, and so it's hard to make those decisions in a way that makes everybody happy, so.
So you do nothing, you create a liability for the city too.
Absolutely you do. Yeah, do nothing for me is never an option.
No.
You gotta do something.
Yeah.
Right, but anyway. We had several recommendations to the police department. I think all of these have been addressed. The utility of the flock system successes, Chief went over that in his presentation that one night in council meeting. I haven't heard anything on the active solicitation of donations for a drone. Do you know if anything's happening on that? Will you check on that, John? Cause
Yeah, our main drone pilot who was doing the request is not around. I don't know if the drone is still planned
Okay.
on, so.
we had the discussion on the CSO, and if I remember right, there is not a new CSO in the current budget. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, so, the police have pulled that off of their request.
CSO.
Community
Community
service.
service officer, yeah. In the administration piece, I know that the Connection Magazine line item was removed. I know that where they can, they're encouraging ACH payments so that we're not paying credit card fees as small as they are. I know that on the recreation that they have looked into the rebates on pumps. I don't know that there are any that we can get, but I
They
know.
told me in one of the meetings that he thought that they were gonna capture some.
Okay, good.
The pumps haven't been installed yet, but
Yeah.
probably in July.
He looked at that file I flipped to you and
Mhm.
he said that he thought he was gonna be able to capture some rebate.
And then also with recreation, the continued discussion on pay to play, right? And we've gone through that already. Yes, something? Oh, I thought you raised your hand.
No, sorry.
And then our last recommendations, we have had the discussion or explanation on what is covered through the base water fee versus the usage fee. Again, transportation utility fee was brought up again, separate fee, property tax, and the whys and wherefores behind that and the concerns. There was a concern that we had on is it TechNet, John? The salary comparison site, making sure that the information is sufficiently accurate. John showed me some of that because I was the one that had most of the questions on that. And I'm pretty comfortable that the information is correct. It was how I was looking at the information. I wasn't realizing what it was I was exactly looking at. So transient room tax, we cannot charge that on the VRBOs. So that's something that we can't do. And I know that our finance team
It's just more complicated. It was the long term. We can't do transit room tax
Oh, that's
on
right.
long-term
That's
rentals. We can on the VRBOs.
Any additional comments or questions? Okay. The item number 2 then, general fund revenues, the biggest question I had that I thought the committee would want to chime in on is for anybody that looked at the tentative that was proposed on 410 versus that on 4.7. If you look at the very first line of property tax, proposed or estimated property tax collection was going to be 3.1. It's now set at 4.3, $1.2 million difference. I'm not a CPA, never wanted to be a CPA, but in my I can help you with wheelchairs, but not with CPA stuff. In my rudimentary math, that's a 40.9% increase. Is that correct? Over the 3.1?
40 to 50%, yeah.
Yeah. Or over the 12 point, or the,
3.1 to 4.3.
so yeah, I mean, it's a little nuanced because it's technically 2.9 to 4.3, but we had already had the 175,000 baked into the original
Okay.
budget. That was the 4%.
So we're in that 38 to 40% property tax increase if council decides to do it that way. So the questions that I wrote down is, how are we going to segregate those funds so that we know that the money being collected for road repairs is being used for road repairs? And how, I know we're working on a triage list for the roads of the roads that need to be done first and the order in which we're going to do those. Any other questions or thoughts, committee members?
I have a crazy thought.
Well, you're not a committee member, so hang on.
My
I know.
question to you, Chris, would it be helpful if I came to city council and spoke and, okay, and that's, what time is that tonight, 6?
6 o'clock.
Okay.
It's a working session, so it's right here.
It'll be right in here.
Oh,
It'll
okay.
be nice and cozy.
so I'm allowed to come in on that one?
Yeah,
I just not like
absolutely.
at the meeting, whatever?
Yeah.
Okay.
And
I'll plan
public
on coming
comment, the
down
whole
and just
thing.
sharing my last 6 months' experience and,
Yeah,
That'd be helpful.
okay,
that would be very helpful.
then will you guys come home and fix my sprinklers tonight after we're done with, just kidding. Woo, I got to know.
That was that whole.
I'm actually pretty good at sprinklers. I'm happy to help you.
I've been pushing it off, but I'll come tonight.
I got a question in this same section here. We're
Yes.
forecasting our sales tax
That's good.
revenue declining.
That was my,
Sales tax.
Yeah, 'cause we got new businesses coming online, sales tax actually jumped.
that's the mayor.
It's a little nuanced. It's actually showing a $96,000 increase over our current budget year from 4.8 to almost 4.9. But from 410 to 5.7, we reduced our projection by the 56,000. So we had originally projected 150,000 in an increase, and then we took 56 out of it in the conversation with the council. So there still is about a $100,000 increase projected, which I think is a 2.5%.
When do we think these other businesses will be online? The new ones?
That was less than that, because I thought 3% was what we had originally. Wasn't it? From
I
4.8 to 4.95. That's where I just did that math. Anyway,
Yeah.
whatever. But
so most of those businesses are probably 12 months out. So they're going to be coming in at the end of next fiscal year. It's about 12 months to outfit a commercial space. And some of those don't even have building permits yet. So some have applied, but yeah,
What's that?
no,
Oh, you're
it's
agreeing.
low.
But I agree with your statement that it should be close to 3, because that's, and Mayor hates to hear this, but over the past many years, it's been over 3 year to year. So I mean, it's one of those things that you can underdo it, and that's fine, because then you're not overly optimistic. But at the same time, if you're raising property tax because if you're trying to be, pessimistic, and you're raising property taxes to cover it, and then at the end, you're over, or under budget, whatever, by 150, or you have extra money at the end of the year, you can't just, I guess you could return it, but at the same time.
Why
I don't
can't that extra money, that's where my brain goes.
Exactly.
Underestimate the property, the sales tax, overcharge a little bit on the fee or the property tax. You have some extra, we're so far behind on roads, why can't you just put more money towards roads? Is that a dumb question,
So-
or is that?
No, you're correct. So what we've historically done is when sales tax comes in high and expenses come low, we transfer most of that into capital. And the the recent history, that has gone into roads. And
Prior to
then,
recent history, it has gone into pool and amphitheater and other stuff, or what?
yeah, I mean, not pool, but amphitheater, and then other projects like that. And roads has always been part of the money that's gone to. But amphitheater was probably the biggest thing we've done recently. That was about $1 million of city funds. And then really the rest is roads and public safety.
I think one of the cautions that council has to have though, with the whole sales tax, property tax issue is we've gotten ourselves where we are in large part, I think, because we became so dependent on the annual increase in sales tax.
Mm.
It was 7, 8, 9, 10% year after year after year after year. And so it was really easy for the legislative body to say, we're going to do the popular thing. We're not going to raise property taxes because we can do what we need to do off of the sales tax increase. Well, now that the economy has changed and the sales taxes aren't increasing the way they are, the cost of running the city still increases every year. And so that revenue has to come from somewhere. The only other option that the legislative body has is to raise property taxes. So it looks like, well, how come, I had a conversation with an individual this week. How come for decades we didn't ever raise property taxes? Well, you should have been. That's the long and the short of it is they should have been going up instead of just relying on all these businesses coming into town and living off the fat of sales tax. That property taxes should have been inching up little bit by little bit by little bit, year after year after year, to try to keep up with inflation, if nothing else. And so we have to be careful. I think there has to be caution in the sales versus property tax discussion, that we're not making emotional decisions. That's what I've recommended to council, is that you have to do what's right for the city as a whole. And sometimes that means, we're the city's pretty lean. We don't have an overabundance of staff. We don't have an overabundance of expenditures of fluff expenditures. That, you could just start Xing off and what's spent is what's needed to keep the city running, to keep everything going. So you have to ask yourself, what meat do you want to cut into? Yes, sir.
I thought you were done.
No, you're fine. I'll take that as a signal to be done.
He wasn't asking, he was telling, you're done.
I was
You're done.
voluntold.
Are you done?
I'm done.
I thought you were
No.
done. Krista, you're laughing at me?
No, I'm laughing at the situation.
Okay.
All done.
Two things I think that the committee ought to consider is, I don't believe property taxes were raised as a result of an underestimate of sales tax, and here's why. Because the council approved what I call a federal budget, which is expenses exceeded revenues. And the answer to that was take it out of the fund balance. And what the government does, they just print money. So there was a shortfall at one point in time of about 100 and something that was gonna come out of fund balance, about balance. I don't know where it finally ended up after all these changes. But if you really believe that property tax, sales tax is gonna go up, I would prefer to see that estimated instead of taking it out of the fund balance, because to me, fund balance is for critical emergency type situations, not getting into the habit of using that for operations. Then if you're short on sales tax, you can take it out of fund balance. But to me, to approve a budget that had a shortfall, I call that a federal government budget.
Just, did I understand that correctly? You're saying the North Ogden City budget at one point did that,
That's this year.
On the April 10th, the first
Oh, that was
one,
this year, okay.
143.
It shows right now the use of $132,000 worth of fund balance currently.
Which means that expenses
Expenses
exceed
are
revenue.
over revenue. That was the initial April budget.
So that's current.
Current.
I believe.
Yeah,
That's
in April, it was zero. There
No,
wasn't
go
any
to-
use.
No, go down to hey, where are we?
Yeah,
Isn't
it's
that-
right here, contributions and transfers.
130 grand or whatever, or?
Cause underneath it, it had, if you go below to the bottom,
Revenue projections decreased because.
To the very last page.
Property tax-
well, to the below recreation.
Identify is what we did. But I think
Yeah,
it's
right.
more of a decrease.
Nope,
in the
keep going,
revenue,
sorry.
But if you don't have the revenue,
Going up.
that's what I'm saying, is that if you really believe
Keep
the
going.
sales tax will come in higher,
That's fine.
I would prefer,
Go down.
if you overestimate
Isn't
the
that-
sales tax, then you could, but the budget, the fund balance concerns me. Because that's why I call it federal budget, and that's its budgeted expenses that exceed revenue.
So, I mean, wasn't that the 410, wasn't the 143 that we had? Or am I losing that?
410.
At the bottom, 143? Our expenditures were over our revenue?
Yeah, you're right. So those are the two numbers. So it went from 143. Well, yeah. So it actually balanced on this one on the 5.7 because we moved it up to the top. You're right. It was 143. Now it's 132, but it's shown as a use of fund balance above to make it balance.
And that was where? That you said it was in the.
But if you wanted to, all you need to do is,
Transfers.
increase property, your estimated sales tax by, what, about 3%, John? So you have a 5.5%?
Yeah.
You're estimated right now at 3%,
No.
2.5.
2.5.
Something.
So you're in suggesting,
He's not, he's just saying.
I'm just saying is if
You
you
could.
overestimate your sales tax and it doesn't come in, you always have fund balance
right,
to fall back on. Right?
right.
But that's not a good way to budget, technically.
Well,
The mayor's-
it's probably a better way to budget than to,
Steal it from the balance of big bid to begin with?
yeah, because what you're saying here is you're willing to approve a budget where expenses exceed
Willing to,
revenue.
that's right, willing
And I
to
don't like
approve
that.
those
That's why I
expenses.
call it federal budget.
Yeah, I didn't catch that. Now that John says that, I see that. Cause I was looking at the bottom line and it says zero.
Yeah, because he moved it up to the top as a revenue.
So he cheated, is that what you're saying?
It's government.
I put it in
I
the
know.
correct fund.
I know, I don't, you know. Sarcastic.
Yeah, no, you're good. But yeah,
Should be
so
used to the mayor being sarcastic, so I guess they're working on me.
You're gonna miss me, aren't you, Colbert?
So much, you have no idea. Anyway,
still 3 days left to sign up.
that's true.
I'll sign him up.
That's right. Forge a signature.
Up proxy.
He'll pay me a lot of
Yeah, yeah.
money.
Hope that dime goes a long way.
Yeah.
That you find on the side of the road.
Have to figure out how to pick it out.
So is that I do.
Mhm.
Is that something, Chris, that you want to bring up to
Yes.
council, or do you want us to bring it up?
Well, both.
Okay, I've added it to my list that will encourage council to increase sales tax estimates to 5.5%.
Or raise the property tax, because you shouldn't, like you said, you shouldn't be taking rating, I guess that's a good way to say it. Fund balance at the beginning to cover something that you either
Right.
overestimated or, underestimated, I guess, I don't, whatever.
The problem with that is, Chris, and I'll remind you this, and I know you don't want to be right. But remember last year when the budget was passed, I said, you don't need to increase property taxes that much? Remember that?
Mhm.
I was saying you could probably get around 4 or 5 and the council went 9.5. The problem is when you do that, you increase the property tax to that degree. Yeah, you kind of guaranteed it. But you can't do anything about it if it's overestimated.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
Where with the
The sales tax, you could.
Does
I got
that make sense?
It does.
Just throwing out information for your discussion to make a decision, whatever you decide, but that's why I said that's a dangerous budget when it's passed.
I've added that to our recommendations then. Committee agree?
Yep.
Okay. Right then. There isn't time to go over all of the expenditures. We did that I think we did that pretty well as we went through the yellow sheets, so we'll just skip past number 3.
Unless Mike had an exorbitant amount that you wanted.
On the insurance,
Yes, sir.
what
Oh, yeah.
happened that we jumped to 143?
We had a couple of claims.
No,
the-
well, it just went up.
Our workers' comp claims have gone up, which affects our E-mod, so that doubled, went from 55 to 110. Last year, our insurance budget did not include our unemployment insurance. In that line, it was housed somewhere else. We brought it back into where it's supposed to be. And
Drifted out of wherever it used to be.
yeah, but then, and then the other one is that our general insurance liability went up. So just offloading old dump trucks and buying new that increases our rates because now that we've got a piece of equipment worth 300,000 instead of 20 grand. And so just kind of the sum of all that led to $140,000 increase. One of the biggest components that's hitting our industry is public safety coverage. Utah has some laws that help us quite a bit, but it still is expensive because there's a lot of lawsuits on with officers lately. So,
But the big one is workman's comp. right?
yeah, 55 of it was workman's comp. It's called the E-mod. So they rate us against other entities like us. And we used to be at a 0.7 and now we're at a 0.97. And that 27% swing moved us to where we're about average and basically doubled our cost.
Plus payroll's gone up.
Yeah, and payroll's gone up. And
So did you do some kind of training and whatnot to avoid those type of accidents and then go back to insurance and see if you can get a discount?
so they're part of our risk committee. In fact, we met today and talked about some of the programs we've been implementing. They don't have the ability to go back and change the E-mod, but the hope is that over the next 3 years, we can bring that down as we see less injuries. Mhm. And some of those injuries are, public works is not the problem. They've been really good. Haven't had, any major issues there. It's people getting injured while they're tackling suspects and things like that. It's been in the public safety side. So
No more tackling.
no more tackling,
Don't have
no
any
more
crime.
climbing fences, no more writing report.
What do you say?
Just shoot them.
We did have that recommended this week on a Facebook post regarding dogs being off leash.
Oh, yeah,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that was a big
Did you see
thing.
that?
Yes.
that's scary.
What, I didn't see it, what was it?
An individual suggested that the solution to off leash dogs was former military roving patrols, armed, walking through the community and basically shooting dogs.
Well, if we're gonna allow that, I could do that all day, every day from my back porch with off leash dogs, so. I'm not saying that's what I would do, I'm just saying there's a lot of off leash dogs. that-
Sounds like an HOA situation up there.
Now, it's
It's in foothills behind
I need
it.
to sneak away for 15 minutes. That's
The
okay.
charity days revenue.
well, excuse John for the.
Scott can answer the questions, yeah. for
Scott
me.
can answer the questions. Scott, come up here and assume the position. would you?
So charity days revenue, we're saying we're gonna drop 55?
What line item are you looking at, Mike?
It's page 11. Under the revenue.
They adjusted that for something, and I'm trying to
Well,
remember. I think the fact that we were switching gears on that.
That's looking at it from last year where they actually turned a profit. They were selling tickets and
Yeah.
it was a whole different game last year. This year's gone back to the way it's
Did
traditionally
they turn
been.
profit last year? I thought they basically broke even. I thought
No,
it was the
they
year
put
before.
money back into the funds.
They did?
They
Okay,
actually ate up the fund.
that's what I thought. Thank you.
No, they actually, there was $19,000 they made
Oh,
from the
they-
previous year.
2 years ago, they.
And revenues,
went
expenses
all
were greater
out.
than revenue, so
Sold
I
tickets
believe they ate some
for
of
a
that
little
up,
house,
but,
for,
to the point was they're not,
kids ride,
and you should see a reduction in the
dropping
expenses
ping pong.
Yeah.
balls,
to offset that, but, yeah, they were selling tickets for
But it was a
carnival.
volunteer committee that this girl went.
Yeah, it's, if you look at the Well, it's page 11. So the net total is 5. So
Yeah, if you look at their expenditures from last year, 130,281.
we dropped the carnival.
It
That
was
dropped-
proposed,
that was the biggest
proposed at
expense.
116, then that got dropped, then things got dropped, so now it's at what, 61.2, 66, 61.2 total expenditures.
So the revenue from.
Anticipated
yeah,
revenue 66.2. Okay, the last,
I got one more.
yes, sir, sorry.
On
You
the
just keep it
new
coming.
homes coming in, how many are we forecasting to come in this next year?
Let me text me.
I just look at the
Number.
utility
Yeah.
revenue and it doesn't appear to be jumping as much as what you've got coming in.
Yeah, I think that's one of the revenue adjustments that were made. We went and looked at building permits. And I think it was. Anyway, it was about half of what had been projected. On growth, and I'll just throw this out for somebody to remember. Is that growth in property tax was not intended to be used for operations to go in that was used to go into fund balance to accumulate enough when the next officer was hired. So that we weren't used to using that money up for general operations. But that has not been the case. It's been considered as just general operating revenue. But I think last year, what was our growth, Chris? 68,000 or 58,000?
You're talking from,
Property tax growth, the growth, not the change in the rate, but the actual growth. And we thought it was based, Mike, on what we saw this year was less than that, because the original budget was like 175,000. But when we looked at building permits and just did an estimate of the average property tax, I think we cut it about half. So, I can't remember how many units it was, 50? Yeah, something like that.
We have somewhere between like 50 and 70 new homes that come in, and the hard part is this total unknown of, we have almost 2,000 apartments and townhomes and connected units that are approved, ready for building permit today. That just aren't coming out of the ground because of commercial financing or any other number of reasons. So it's a total unknown. Like, we could get 300 permits come in one time and build one of those major apartment buildings, or we're sitting with single family.
What's the number you need for average?
I think it's 400, or 4 or 5 months. Like 4.25 maybe, on average.
So then that means the growth is primarily multifamily then, because you can't build a single.
What we build in too is saying, okay, we'll have the new Bank of America, we'll have these new buildings that are assessed at full value.
Okay.
It's just hard to
But they
tell.
don't-
This year, when we looked at building permits, we thought the projected revenue growth was basically double of what we've seen since the pandemic. And we didn't see massive growth, right, with the way rates are. Talking with Spencer Stevens, he said, first of the year started out really good, then it died. When all these tariffs and interest rates started creeping back up. So we just kind of said, we've never had, because I think the original estimate was like 160,000. So, we've never had that much since the pandemic. So that's one of the things that my revenue was reduced, is because we just felt we weren't gonna see, like Promise Point, we can't even get them to call us back, can we?
No.
They took the trailer and left. They are done.
Yeah, they have 400 units.
Sorry, this is off topic, but I am curious. So in a situation like that, what kind of property tax revenue is that property currently generating for the city? Or is it just kind of on hold until it's built?
It's
Right.
very little. So when they vest with new units, you get the jump,
Okay.
the new structures that go in.
So
Based on
currently-
valuation.
Currently, it's just raw land
It's kind
essentially.
of like, yeah.
It's
kind of
not,
agricultural
could,
based.
why would that not be taxed as a commercial lot concept?
The front
front
two
is.
are.
Front
yeah.
is, okay.
So the front
That's
two,
rock
they have
round
the-
commercial.
they have the Valora name and the sign out there. that's 2 lots. So one at 1700 in Washington, and then
Sure.
one more before the.
Sorry, let me clarify that. If I go buy a lot next to me, which I'm trying to do, that is gonna be taxed at 100% the value as a commercial, meaning commercial saleable.
Mhm.
Okay, so it's taxed at full value of 2, 3, 400 grand. Why down there are each of those lots not being taxed at full value, or are you saying it is? Not commercial, meaning commercial versus residential?
Yeah.
Depends if it has trees on it or not.
I don't know.
It's,
Why you gotta poke that? Got a
So they-
chainsaw? Something to throw at it?
the way they've done their subdivision plat is that they have platted parcels and then remainder ground. And so they're
Okay.
sitting on this like big remainder ground that,
Gotcha.
We
They're
wouldn't- we wouldn't-
avoiding the game by calling it remainder
yeah, we
ground.
wouldn't issue them a building permit on it. And so what they do is they record a subdivision plat as each phase
Okay,
is
gotcha.
taken
Okay.
down. And then they have,
They're paying agricultural rates on the land until they record the plat, and that's when they start paying the commercial rate.
Right.
But it's only 1 January. So 1 January is when they determine what
Yeah.
it will be taxed
correct, yeah.
at. So, yeah, if they finally build
Play
it,
that game.
yeah, if they build it January 4th, that rest of the year, it doesn't matter. It's whatever it was June or January. I played the game.
Yeah, no, I just wonder whether they pull the trailer off there still. If they're recorded lots, platted lots, then they should be paying the full value, paying tax on the full value of the actual lot. So,
Yeah.
But
and right now is a weird time of the year because a lot of subdivisions that are sitting at preliminary plat right now won't go to final plat and record because then the developer is sitting on 35 or 40 lots that they have to pay taxes on as it rolls over. So that's where, they'll come in like January 2nd, record a plat, and then they have one full construction year to sell all those lots off of their books.
that's why they
Somebody else
pulled
is
the equipment off the
responsible.
development by me.
You know what concerns me is when I look at the assessed values of things in the city, trying to get information, I really think our commercial ground in the city is undervalued. Now, they're not gonna say anything, right?
Mhm.
But I don't know if the city can challenge it because, I mean, I've seen what property taxes are on places like Lee's, roadside stores and Smith's. But I'm telling you, I think Lee's was valued like at $5 million, the whole building. Well, I can tell you, it's worth a lot more than that, but when I went through the tax rolls to try to see where our property tax was coming from, I really felt our commercial was undervalued. I don't know.
Let's not go too aggressive after businesses, though. We are limited on that.
No, but I pay the fair share, right?
Yeah, I like to use property
No
tax.
more, no less, the fair share, whatever this
And
does.
that's, yeah,
Well, the assessor lives in North Ogden.
Huh?
The assessor lives in North Ogden.
Do you need to vote?
Well, is it,
No.
you got a new one.
No,
He lives here. I met him last night.
It's not, real area.
Yeah, I didn't bring his card.
but they have some weird rules. That's all I know.
I got one last question, I'll be quiet.
No, you ask as many as you'd like. That's why we had this meeting today.
On the aquatic center,
Yes, sir.
the 444,000 is slid into 25, 26.
The what?
The aquatic center capital not through for prior year expenses.
Well, what we did, Mike, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Fulver. But what we did is we looked at it because that shortfall has historically been coming out of RDA funds. Now that the RDA has ended, there's no more allocation of that. So we said, it's probably gonna take a year or two.
But I think
No,
this
the
was
40
for that install that slid from.
It's the playground or the
Open.
playground thing moving because of the, yeah.
I think
it
it's
wasn't
four,
moving it.
it was
Yeah.
$444,000.
Yeah, they can't get it until.
Right,
Yeah.
can't you accrue it and have it come out of this year versus 25, 26?
Government accounting
You
doesn't
can't
allow
do
for
that in
that.
government.
But once again, that's coming out of RDA funds, I believe.
It was like half and half. It was 222 and
We
222.
we got a grant from, ramp.
Yeah.
And then the rest was, RDA, funds
yeah.
where we allocated the money, I believe.
Sounds right.
And so it really shouldn't be an expense. The money is coming either out of RDA funds or out of, ramp. So accruing it wouldn't really make any
Already.
difference because
Yeah.
you accrue the revenue side. I believe it's still sitting out there in the RDA. Money is unexpended but
Yeah.
committed. So it should be still out there in the RDA.
That was one of the changes, Mike, that occurred a number of years ago. When we went to new auditors who gave us a more accurate look at where we were as a city. One of the things that had been happening was this idea that we were carrying over and accruing. And we were corrected that no, the expense has to be fully taken in the year that it was actually done. And so that, I mean, there were some wonky things that happened with numbers and has changed how we do things over the last 7+ years now.
Yeah, it
And
was,
in government, you can't do like prior year adjustment type entries like you can in
No.
the sector.
Now, in fact, it's, my understanding is, and government accounting is, that's why they try to get property tax in by the end of August, the final number. Because you can't even recognize revenue unless it's actually cash in the bank within 60 days. They don't let you accrue it. Even though you know it's coming, it has to be paid within 60 days, or you're out of luck.
Mm.
So in government accounting is, yeah,
It's a little different.
it's a little,
It's a lot different.
yeah, half of it's from RDA. So 222 and then ramp was the other. I haven't found it yet, but.
Okay, the last item that we had on here was for, just to have a discussion on the property tax increase, and we've pretty well done that already. Property tax increase versus fees, versus an increase to the sales tax estimate. Going to mention that tonight. And when I make my comments, we'll talk about the transportation utility fee. We'll also mention the recommendation to consider increasing the sales tax estimate up to 5.5% from the 2.5% that it is now. And then if revenues come in short, then council can then look at going into fund balance to make up the difference, as Mayor has well pointed out, rather than approving basically a deficit budget and saying we're gonna raise taxes for money that we may not need to do.
I have a question.
Yes.
So if, right now the budget is showing the road as a property tax
It's a
increase,
property
correct?
tax increase.
So if they change it and they make it a fee,
Mhm.
what does that leave the property tax increase at? What
Whatever,
percent? Because
About
we're
4%.
just talking,
We're gonna do both then, if we.
No.
It was
there would still be a,
There
yeah.
would still be a property tax increase of about 4%.
And I think, so when I've been talking to people lately because they know,
That's just
They
the
know
inflationary.
yeah, I go to council meetings and they were asking about the roads and how they were gonna get billed for that or whatever. And I said, well, it's going back and forth between property taxes and a fee. And several people were like, you mean they're gonna charge me a fee, increase my utility bill, and then raise my taxes too? I don't think people are gonna get that it would have been the same if it was all property tax. I think you do both. And that's just an observation.
Yeah,
I
what,
agree with you on that. I misunderstood. I thought it was gonna be one or the other.
No,
But if
it's, there are other things raising property taxes.
Here's a thought on that.
5.5,
I think the community,
was it 5.5, Chris?
give or take, yeah.
Five and a
community
half.
needs to understand that we're way behind on roads. And again, when I've talked to people, they're sympathetic to it. Everybody I've talked to has said, go the fee. However, if the fee amount, the monthly fee amount set is not enough to get to that 1.5 million, whatever the number is, then you have to do the property tax increase as well. I agree with you. There's gonna be a bit of a revolt. Because, so if we calculate at the fee, what is the fee gonna generate? I mean, if you're going half from a 10, well, we're talking a 40% tax increase down to 5%. that correct?
About 5.5.
Yeah.
Okay, so the fee is gonna generate roughly $1 million of the $1.5 million, is that?
The fee is gonna cover all of it. The property tax increase is not the roads, it's other
Then what's the
stuff,
property tax
correct?
increase
It's-
for?
That-
Am I correct? It's other
property
things.
tax.
Okay, so I was right, it was one or the other, it's not both, so what's the purpose of the tax increase if they go the fee?
Other stuff that has nothing to do with roads.
CPI and insurance costing.
But people aren't gonna care. It's gonna be, oh, you're doing this. You guys are just, you're hitting me from every direction. That's what I'm thinking. A lot of people that
yeah.
aren't savvy on how,
And it's a difficult explanation to have, but the reality is the base costs of operating the city go up every year, and that's what that 5.5% property tax increase is. So essentially what we're saying is we're here and now we need to get here, and so that's 5.5% to get us from here to here.
Yep.
And that's just to operate the
That's just the
city.
city
That's
operation.
just to operate the city and keep things going as they have been. And then we're saying we need an additional
Yeah, 1.5.
1.5 million
Road.
for
Maybe.
roads to get ahead of,
Nope.
to do more roads than we have been.
Up to
Yeah.
Chris, this explanation right here, Joseph, I think is very important for you guys, city council, to explain. Okay, because you really are talking two different
Yeah.
things. And I understand it.
And that's why we need a page, maybe tops,
Further up, all the way.
of what is changing for the budget for the coming year.
Yeah, I
The
agree.
citizen summary.
Make it simple. The cost of the city are going up.
Sunset, Clinton, somebody had that. And I think it's a one pager for
Yep.
something my wife can understand.
Yes.
And I will just say that because I love her to death, but sometimes she's like, that doesn't make any sense. And I
Well,
love,
and Sandy, I think you've brought up an important point, is that there's the increase, whether it's a fee, there's more than one thing happening.
Yeah.
Right? There's increased costs to run the city. And we want to get ahead on what we are doing for the roads, and that's an additional bundle of money. You know, we want to go to Disneyland for us old folks. We want to go to Disneyland and there's this cost to get in. But we want to do Splash Mountain, an e-ticket ride. So it's this much to get into Disneyland, that's the 5.5%. But then if we want to do more than just be there, we've got to pay the e-tickets.
Remember, it's not, I just want to clarify something. The property tax increase for the residents is not 5.5%. That includes the growth number. So as you can see.
What have you got there?
Original proposal was to go from 3.1 million to go to 3.1 million from 2,933,000.
Oh, so a little over 100, not even 100,000.
which is five point something.
Yeah, but that includes the growth number. which
That
is like
includes the growth
65,000.
number.
So. when
But
you're
that
looking at
growth
the-
number, we should be setting aside for the new officer.
But it's not. But I'm
Right.
telling you, it's in there. That increase from 3.1 million, from 2,933,000.
To 3.1, what is that, 5% you said, Chris?
Yeah.
5.69%, but if you take out the amount that's in there for growth, remember? That's
Right.
not an increase to existing residents. So reduce that number by about 65,000, and that's your truth in taxation you'd be going in.
but if you say that
Yeah.
in a council meeting
Oh, no,
and
that's
that's what they hear, yeah,
Yeah.
that's, yeah.
All they know is they're gonna get, I think it was like 3.5 or 4% is my recollection.
Of the amount.
What is it if you take out, I think it's $68,000 in the growth number. So if you take
Take 3.1 million
Million.
minus 2932.
Just doing something else, hold on.
Is there a point where you don't have to do some taxation?
Minus
like
60?
1 or 2%?
Minus 68,000,
50 cents.
3.032.
Yeah, I thought it was in the 3.5 range.
Yeah, so.
CPI is 3, isn't it?
But if you're raising sales tax by 5%,
Not
They're
the
saying
sales
it's going
tax.
down to-
The projection,
yeah,
Mhm.
and you get 5, that's what I was trying to do.
but that's this roving unknown, right?
Right.
But
Yeah, it's about 3.3%.
Yeah, so what you would say is, if you move it to a fee, you're saying we're gonna increase, you'd have a truth in taxation hearing. and you say, we're increasing property tax 3.3%. That's what would show up on the preliminary tax notice that comes out. 3.3%. And then, you know, you can tell them why you're doing that without getting into a lot of detail. Just say, here's what went up: wages, insurance,
Yeah.
blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, one page, make it simple, make it clear.
Well, and Peter's been given the instructions to do that, to do an executive summary.
And then the other would be if council decided to do it as a fee,
And then on the fee,
there would be a fee for,
but you wouldn't talk about that in truth and taxation.
no.
And
it
somebody
wouldn't have
said
to
they
be that.
preferred property tax because it was more transparent.
What's your opinion?
Yeah, if you're not talking about everything all at once, I don't know, it just seems like, you know, oh, well, we're not gonna get you really mad at us tonight. We're gonna tell you this bad news,
Yeah,
but then we're gonna wait and tell you and I know it all has to happen, but I just know people's perception when they haven't come and understood how things work here, you know, and I'm sure I would be saying the same thing had I not been.
No, I agree with you, but let me ask you this. If you say, look, we're doing a property tax increase to run the city. However, we need to get our road budget built up, which is separate, and we're gonna do a fee that is specific to the roads, can only be used for roads. What's your opinion of what other people might say? Because again, that goes back to what I said. Everybody I've talked to says, do a fee
I don't know.
specific to roads. Now, I was thinking it was gonna be fee or property tax increase, and now I'm seeing it's probably gonna be both. So I agree with you, there are gonna be people snapping at it, but
But the property tax increase isn't for roads.
agree.
But it'd be two things. It's either a fee plus the minor property tax increase. The minor property tax increase being, my understanding is just to pay the bills, right? That gets you baseline. So you're either 3.3% net increase or like 6 or 7 or 8 or something like that to do both. Or you implement the fee, which is dedicated, but in the early conversations, when the mayor was in here, you'd have the property tax would come in and you would create a dedicated revenue fund or dedicated savings account, essentially, that is all of these funds are used for public safety, but for this section, which is now used for roads. And you would create a restricted account that those monies would go into. But that doesn't stop a future council from redirecting that restricted account any more than it stops a future council from eliminating transportation utility fee. But it's just one or the other, whichever one is more clear to the residents, citizens, or you think is, more easily passable or utilizable.
That was part of the discussion. Remember, somebody said, hey, transparency, because you've gotta have a truth and taxation hearing. So to Sandy's point, at that point in time, you're saying, here's your total out of pocket. It's a 44% increase. Which would, I think we have to go higher so we can make it matter, but, I enjoy people doing that.
No, I agree. You should, if you're gonna hit them, the roads need to be understood. And if you say, hey, you're gonna be paying this much now, oh, but in a couple of years, you're gonna be paying double or triple because we're not paying enough now, they might say something. But a lot of people are like, oh, that's tomorrow's problem. I don't have to worry about that.
Yeah,
Just
but keep in
like-
mind, a third of the people are like,
They
no,
don't
I'm
care.
fine with the way the roads
Yeah.
look right now.
Until they turn into, but the problem you face is that once you start filling potholes, the road's done. And so that's, anyway, but long story short, I think the bottom line though is that and that goes to my plan thing, is that if you state, hey, we're doing a stopgap this year because we don't have time to do anything else. And really, to be honest. And so we've done a preliminary study. This is what it says. We're picking certain roads and this is what we're trying to fund this year. Next year, we'll come up with something more comprehensive. We might do this other little usage fee that may be different than a standard fee, but this is how we're gonna get here this year. And that, to me, was, hey, we're 100,000% transparent. Yeah, we don't know what we're doing quite yet, but this is what the best option is for current this year. Because if we don't, then we start falling off the cliff faster.
This is where you and I disagree, Chris,
Why?
on this. I think
Perfect
Public
logic.
Works, Public Works has a plan.
Right, no, but
They're the experts on it, right?
but for the next year,
But the next year is and I'm gonna refresh your memory. Discussion.
Yeah.
We said, because I was saying, I feel sorry for the next year's council, because they gotta figure out where to come up with, in addition to the 1.2 million they're talking about this year, they gotta come up with another million.
Right.
And that's gonna be either in property tax, whatever the council decides, or fee. And then
And maybe another staff member, because if you can only efficiently follow a contract with only 3 million, but 3 million is not gonna cut it every year, you need to find somebody else to get to
But
5.
Dave's saying, right or wrong, I mean, we're trusting Dave, Dave's saying $3 million a year will get us, what do you call it, repair versus replace. That'll get us all the roads that have been identified in the 0 to 4 category or something like that. You know, he can help. The unknown is the inflation, because we've seen 60% inflation in asphalt costs, right?
Right, but the 3 isn't gonna, that was a huge number. Even the 0 to 4 was a ginormous number, and that's gonna carry to the
What
left
Dave
really
is telling us is that $3 million a year, they'll prevent those roads in the 0 to 4 from falling over. Then he's got the 6 to 10.
I thought that
can't
was-
remember all of it.
I thought the 3% or the 3 million was just, that's how much they could do, period,
That-
with current staff.
Yeah.
That wasn't protecting the roads from falling off the cliff.
No, it was twofold. His instruction.
See, that's why we gotta write stuff down.
What is proposed fee gonna be monthly to do a fee? Like $15, I'm hearing that.
1.2
Now-
million.
Yeah, and
That's
there's,
the other question.
that's a discussion for
Divided by
tonight.
Okay, so
1.2.
7,000 residents.
that's divided by 7,000 homes basically, or whatever.
7.
It was about $15, I think. is
Yeah,
what the
I thought it was like
council
between
thought.
$11 and $15.
1.2 million divided by 7,000 is 171 divided by 12, there we go, yeah, 15, 14, 20.
Yeah.
Okay, so the 1.2, so if that is, that'll be basically indefinite, it's gonna be on the bill forever, that's the one that'll generate,
That's forever.
okay?
That's a minimum forever.
Yeah, to just keep the roads
The
maintained.
next year, the council has to decide where at least the million, because what's happened, there's been this money sitting in transportation utility fee that's never been used.
Because we use that now.
We're gonna use that as part of the 3 million. It won't be there next year. So if 3 million is the magical number, and Chris, you should ask that question of Dave tonight,
The magical number.
you know, how.
He's stuck in Dallas right now, but
So really, we almost need to go to $30 a month.
was that?
Realistically, for that 3 million, almost need to go to $30 a month.
Well,
Which is really
yeah.
gonna get some excited people, plus you start talking
Inflation.
tax increase, and yes, inflation I'm disregarding for now.
Yeah, you'd have to do it, you gotta at least have that $1 million that's not there in the transportation utility fee fund right now.
Yeah.
Because you're gonna use that
So-
this year, so that's gonna go to zero.
The reason I asked that is, Chris, this is falls back on you guys explaining this, so that you explain, look, this $15 a month fee is gonna generate 1.2, that's half of what we actually need. So, and that, you know, and you just have those numbers out there, say, look, we need 3 million, we have 1 million now, we're gonna generate another 1.2. You know, but then
Need
explain
zero.
next year, we're gonna have the same problems, we may need to raise that fee to $30 a month.
That's
Yeah.
that plan thing I was talking about, which I made a very rough draft up yesterday.
Are you the one that's been defaulted as the voice for the council on this issue?
You
I don't know.
engineer.
I don't know. I yell when people don't listen, and so and then I argue with the mayor. Yeah.
Right?
So, but
It's counter.
One of the difficulties is that
At
99%
least he read my emails.
of residents
I do.
don't understand any of this.
No.
If you look at the results, if you took the survey and it'll give you a link to the results. What I found most interesting in the survey wasn't the actual statistical numbers. It was the comments that were made. And comment after comment after comment after comment is the same thing. You guys already have enough money.
You don't need it.
You should already be taking care of the roads. Why do you need more money? There's a complete lack of understanding of where we are financially as a city. And I think that trickles down from the federal and the state level. Where, you know, you hear we're in a budget conundrum, but we're going on the state level, we're going to give $1.5 billion back in tax cuts.
Chris, is that something that could be put in the presentation? Like, is there an idea of how much maintenance is needed per mile of road?
Well, it was actually presented at the last working session. Anyway,
I think you need an executive summary.
Yes, oh,
For
yes.
that fee.
And that's my
Really
point,
lays
is
it out
this
and
plan
pull that
should say,
reporting.
and should have a small graphic that says, this is what we're looking at. This is how we're projected over the next several years of what's gonna kill us. And this is the reason why that we have X number of to make a road, not make a road, but to save a road and kind of push the death date out. It's gonna cost you this much, but if you wait to the end and you have to redo it completely, it costs you X number more. And so
I
that's,
think part of the
But can I say-
perception has been that
He knows.
that as I'm listening to individuals talk and reading their comments, there's this perception that we haven't been doing much when it comes to road repairs.
Yeah.
So I think
Yeah.
part of the
That-
It looks
conversation
like it
has
just
to
popped
be.
up out of the.
Yeah.
I've asked John for these numbers. I don't know that we have them yet. But we need, as part of the conversation, there needs to be an understanding that over the last 10 years, we've spent tens of millions of dollars on road repairs. We've spent a lot of money, 900 to 100,000 to $1 million every year just in BNC road funds over the last 10 years. So that's close to $10 million there that we've spent, plus other funds that we've put in, money that we put in for having 450. We've spent a lot of money on roads. The problem is we have more roads than we have money coming in. And they're degrading faster than the money coming in, and that we have allows them.
not, the funding for road maintenance has not kept pace with inflation for about 5 years.
But I think we need to have a number. I think it's
Yeah.
helpful for
Exactly.
people to understand that your city leaders over the last 10 years, there he is. John, I had talked to you about this. Getting us the road repair number, the money that we've spent on roads in the last 10 years. So that residents can understand, it's not that nothing's been done. We've done a ton and spent a lot of money on road repairs and mill and overlays and fog seal coats and all those kinds of things. And this is how much we've spent. And even at spending this much, the roads, because of the weather that we have here and everything else, the roads degrade faster than you have this exponential inflation that's going on with material costs and labor costs. And roads degrading, and so here's where we are, folks.
No, I agree with you, but I am gonna push back a little bit,
Sure.
because again, if we're 5 to 10 to 50 to $100 million behind on roads, the city has not been figuring that out. There should be some accountability there. So that's why the citizens are gonna be upset, but I
Yeah.
agree with you. Let's show a number. This is what's been spent, guys. It's not like we haven't done anything.
Right.
This is our number. This is where we need to get to.
Brian, you
I-
need to
I
understand,
remember-
the council started, they employed a fee of $3.
Right. Yeah.
Transportation utility fee, number of years ago. That's where this $1 million, it was actually accumulated 1.2 million.
That was in 2017, 2016.
And then down came the ruling.
Yeah.
That said, this is a tax, and it got in this legal thing,
Right.
so. We made the decision, I made the recommendation, and as move it over, take the $3, so if they're gonna say it's illegal. And it's really a tax, just move it over into taxes, right?
Yep.
And continue it on, but then what happened is we went to the all public safety. Because Phil will tell you that the previous council, and I don't think it was Phil, but it was more on it, we're not increasing taxes for anything. So guess what? We're gonna let our playground equipment go to 25 years. Oh, by the way, we're not gonna repair sidewalks. And John, did we get that $100,000 back in the budget?
It's showing in capital improvement right now.
Yeah, but it's always been, previously it was in streets.
The other big piece has been inflation. When we did the road study back, and John, you remember 2014, 2015, just before we did the transportation utility fee.
It was 2015, yeah.
If I remember right, the number to get our roads up to snuff at that time was $15-16 million. So in that 10-year period of time, the cost of materials the continued degradation of the roads and the cost of labor has increased that 7-8 fold.
That's why you'll never.
So it's.
That needs to be spelled out.
Exactly. I agree with you
Chris, my point is
100%.
there, Chris, if you're the one that's the voice, take some notes and be prepared to explain that, so it's a little bit less painful to the folks that have not been.
We thought, I remember the discussions on council in 2015. We thought 15-16 million dollars was just astronomical. And then when this new survey came back, and we're looking at 9 figures, right? 100 million plus.
But understand, the $3 has always been there, it's just never been spent on roads.
That's right. It was shifted over into a
It's
property
been
tax.
accumulated, but here's the problem.
And that's my concern with having it as
That's
property tax.
tax.
It's too easy for it to disappear.
Well, it was never put in a restricted account, I mean, you.
Right.
You can do it, but
Yep.
here's the problem, Brian, having gone through 5 truth and taxation hearings. Because frankly, the current mayor is like a drunken sailor, he just loves to spend that. He can hardly stand it, burn the whole pot. But what happens is this is not a logical discussion that takes place. The more information you give them, it's looked at like, they're just, it's an emotional thing. That's, when people get up and you listen to their comments, am I wrong, Phil? 95% of them is just emotional. I don't want any property tax increase, and you guys don't know what you're doing, and
Right.
blah, blah, blah.
I didn't ask for those
Getting into
flowers
actually
hanging
how do
on
we deal-
Washington.
Yeah,
Why am I paying for them?
but somebody smarter than me, because they don't really listen to the why.
No.
In the truth and taxation hearing. And it becomes all emotional. And my fear is the more you try to justify what you're doing, the more they're gonna be mad one way or the other. So I'm just saying,
In that survey, there were several comments. You mentioned the flowers, Sandy. There were several people who commented. And we haven't had flowers in 5 years now.
yeah,
Is it
Yeah.
3,
Something like that.
4, and it's more than 3.
Yeah.
I've worked here 4 years. It's at least 3. Cause the first year we had flowers.
Okay, so 3 to 4 years. We haven't had them in that long. And there were 5 or 6 people who commented, stop paying for the flowers on Washington Boulevard and put that money to roads. It's like, well, okay, Jack, that's been done.
so, I mean, you can do whatever you want. The end result's gonna be the same. Nobody likes tax increases. Nobody likes more money out of their pocket. It is a very complicated discussion, so you just have to decide, how to go about it. Because they're not gonna be happy either way.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So if and this is gonna sound unfair to some people, I'm just asking. If it was a tax and not a fee, wouldn't it be less for people who are on a fixed income and don't have those people that Chris is,
It depends on
knows
the
they're
value
gonna-
of their home.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
all right. Is that something I
The
would.
flip side to
would
that is,
consider
as Mayor
also.
mentioned earlier, is if council were of the mind to say, okay, we're going to put some kind of a guardrail in place for those that are on fixed incomes, that it won't
Mm.
exceed X amount.
Okay,
That's really difficult to do when it's a property tax, where if it's a fee, then an individual fee can be waived.
oh.
Yeah, but everybody's paying the same fee.
But
Well,
every-
but if it's a fee and you're gonna waive some, then everybody that doesn't understand this is gonna want to have they're all gonna
Sure.
be arguing that
that's
if Joe
if
gets it, why
council,
isn't Tom getting it?
Right.
So,
well, and it kind of goes back, Mayor, we've talked for years now about the sewer district, right? The
Mhm.
sewer district, your sewer district assessment is based on home value, not on the amount of water that gets discharged out of your house. So if I have a family of 15 living in a $400,000 house, and we're using 12,000 gallons of water a month, and that's almost all being flushed down through the sewer, and you live in $1 million home, and it's just you, and you use 2,000 gallons a month, you're paying at least twice, if not more, as much for your sewer than the person who's actually using it more, because it's on home valuation. And so, I mean, there's arguments that can be made both directions.
Yeah, I know. I'm just thinking of that person that Chris was thinking about, that is sitting there and, you know, do I skip 3 meals a week? Do I cut out this medication? Do I give up my dog? That's the only companionship. I mean, something will have to give for a certain percentage of the population. It just will.
We talked about that. That's why we said, you know, came up with the waiver because we're concerned about. Hey, John, on the property tax number, I don't know if we have a general ledger account, but it would seem nice to break out the growth versus the, you know, property tax growth, just because there was some confusion.
Recurring property tax versus growth.
So,
How much
okay.
is in that 3.1 million? How much of that's growth? 68,000?
I think it was, I mean, round numbers, it was something around 70, so 68, 70,000 and the 100.
Accounts, if it's more than 5, we round up.
Yeah,
So because there's a debate that we were increasing property taxes 5%, but I thought it was 68,000, you could say 70, of that 3.1 million is growth. It's not truly a tax increase on the existing.
Right. That, the growth that's shown there isn't all property tax increase.
right.
And you-
Okay, Mike, anything else?
If we do this as a fee structure, when is it implemented? You don't wait until
As soon as the study's
January,
done, you have
so,
to do the study to support it.
but you've already got.
Haven't done a study?
We don't have a study.
So we have the study on the condition of the roads, but we need the, I mean, it's, what did we say, $15,000 to do the financial component. And we haven't done that because the council was leaning towards sales tax.
But you're
But it's-
probably implementing September.
It might be August, because the group that is interested in helping us, they would make it a priority. And we probably have it done in 30 days if we get them the right info.
It's gonna take some programming change too, John, because I noticed
Start
on the houses
collecting now
I've owned prior to that,
next year,
there's a line item for
because
it,
you probably won't.
but on the
get
houses
much done
since, there's
late
no
fall.
line item for it. It doesn't come.
Right,
out
cause
directly.
you figure
Yeah.
the plants are gonna close around late October,
Right.
early November.
Part of November.
The asphalt plants will close.
Hey, Peter.
How's it going?
Mr. Brown. Everybody know Peter?
I just thought I'd jump in.
This is Peter Brown. Brown, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, our new finance director.
Oh, okay.
No, it's okay.
Spaced it.
I was watching downstairs and I was like, huh. I heard GL codes and I'm like, might be good for me to be there.
Well, no, you're here
I-
just in time for public comments.
I should have had Peter be here from the beginning. Like I said, I forgot the meeting was even today, so.
That's okay. That's okay. So Mike, anything else?
The non-essential stuff that we put together, did that ever get acted on? As far as department heads looking at, I mean, if worse comes to worse, they gotta cut 5%, 10%, did that get explored at all?
So in our staff meetings, we've walked through that. I kind of told them that 5% scenario, like they need to look at that. And then I just kind of told them at the 10% scenario, we'd get feedback from them, but more than likely it would be at the top, eliminating programs and positions. That's probably the only way to get the 10%.
But they haven't really dug into it. They're aware it's out there.
Yeah, they haven't given me back as like, hey, these are the things I would eliminate. You know, a good example, I'll pick on Scott. I think his discretionary budget is, if you
His is
eliminate Placer AI, it's $12,000.
Yes, like between $12,000 and $15,000.
So, you know,
Plus
he has to,
Departments that are a little bigger. and-
yeah. It's really parks and police are two of the biggest, and then you start looking at the motor pool and the streets, and that's where you see the most general fund getting spent out of those departments.
Yeah.
But yeah, so they know about it. But we do need to get, they're supposed to be building their list. They haven't turned them in yet. So.
Just a question on if we do this plan identifying, it's gonna be $15 this year, it's gonna be $30 next year. should we be doing the same thing for the aquatic center?
Hmm.
Saying, yes, 950 this year, but we gotta get to. And here's the,
I think the difficulty there is that you can't bind the hands of a future council.
Well,
So you can say,
I know, that's the.
aquatic center needs to be $12 next year, and we have an election this fall.
You know,
Council changes, and the council says, we're not gonna change it.
my recommendation was not to do anything, just dump it on next year's council.
well, so what,
Actually, it was just the opposite, wasn't
Yeah.
it? It was, okay,
What-
we're gonna deal with this.
what I think about doing with the council is implementing an actual written strategic plan, which could have benchmarks like this in it, like this is the target, this is the goal, this is the long range plan. And then force the council to change that and amend that document every year if they want to, so that they at least are consciously making a decision and they've got something they're measuring all of their decisions against.
Did you
that-
say long range plan?
Yeah,
Holy mackerel.
so we've got a chunk of it in place now in that we've kind of got our 5 to 10 year window and projects, but we don't have these kind of year to year decisions like how do we get from 950 to 1150, or how do we get from on the utility fee
Would the
13 to
strategic plan simply be to, within 3 years, break even? The strategy is to break it even, right? How you do that, because there's other revenues that you guys are generating other than the fee. So the strategy would be, which, by the way, how many years have we been saying the pool has to break even?
at least one. 5, but yeah.
But, the strategic plan is not all the fee, it's a strategy of what's gonna happen. We're
Yeah,
gonna keep our roads at this level, and the options are property tax and fee. You can have, but you get into the weeds in a strategic plan.
well,
In essence, you're trying to commit the future.
so what other cities use these documents for is it keeps the council from chasing the squirrel. So if you have this written strategic plan and then a council member calls the department heads and says, hey, this property needs curb and gutter and sidewalk, then the department head's able to say, awesome, add it to the strategic plan and the 5-year capital projects and we'll do it. But we're not just gonna willy-nilly do it because it forces it changes their discussion and keeps them focused on the long term so the department heads can run the short term. I know it's a crazy idea. I feel like I heard it from a skinny Santa. Is that what we call you? Skinny Santa?
But speaking of that, here's one thing I'm still confused on. We had $100,000 on an ongoing sidewalk project that we justified from the standpoint of reducing our risk and keeping things safe. That was not originally in the capital projects fund. When we said we're gonna build this fund at $300,000 a year to meet our projects, that did not include the $100,000 for sidewalks, because that was in the street budget, which is general fund. Now we moved it over to capital projects, but we haven't increased the amount to fund it from 300 to 400,000. So somewhere that's giving. I mean, it's whether it's reducing the $1 million minimum balance. But to me, when you do a comparison, the budget really has another $100,000 shortfall if you're comparing it.
So where'd the money go? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Where did the money go?
Like, why didn't it increase from 300 to 400,000? Why didn't it?
Well, there's nothing going into capital projects funds here, zero. And historically, we've been building it. And how that was justified is the deferral process. So we're just deferring doing this to a future year. But if you're gonna increase the $100,000 in capital projects, it was never in the original budget of 300,000 to fund identified projects. So to me, the budget's really another $100,000 short. Just saying, it's really 400,000. Because nothing's going into capital projects, which was in the strategic financial plan, speaking of changing plans. It's not in the strategic financial plan. And so you're really, that's what I said in one of the council meetings, not only do they have to figure out how to come up with $1 million from, you gotta figure out how you're gonna fund capital projects going forward, which is now 400,000 a year.
So to the mayor's point, what he's saying is this essentially 1.2 is the money that is for roads that's coming out of property tax in the tentative budget.
Okay.
So in theory, this should be 1.6 is the point the mayor's trying to make, or is making.
Because how are you gonna fund capital projects going forward? It's 0 this year. And it was 300 budgeted to meet what was known, and now we've added another $100,000 of sidewalks into there. So next year, the council has to figure out, not only to get the additional million out of, they gotta figure out how to get that million, they gotta figure out how to get 400,000, plus any other operating costs.
Is that 100 already out of streets?
It's not in the streets budget, it got moved over to capital
It
project.
got pulled out. That's not in there now.
No. And I think the only thing that I saw in capital improvements, and mayor's gonna, what'd I say? Improvements, so capital, isn't it CIP? Anyway,
Yeah, we call it we call it the capital improvement fund, but we also call it CIP. And so, yeah,
Whatever,
it's the thing that, anyway, is the fact that they deferred something. And so in my mind, I was like, okay, we're not putting 300 in there, but we're deferring it to the next year. But I agree with what you're stating is that if you're not putting something in there, you're basically kicking the can down the
where are
road.
you gonna get it next year?
That's what I'm saying. Kicking the can, yes. So if you take it out of your budget, yeah, you gotta come up with something. But, and to the point of where the 100 went, it just, yeah,
And we just,
1 year to year, it just didn't go in.
we just approved the X amount on a potential project, right, that came out of the minimum thing, it came up with an opportunity to help us with a long-term project. We just, I don't think you were here. In the closed meeting, we approved
No.
X amount of dollars to do something that will benefit and that came out of
The meat.
the minimum fund balance.
So we're counting on all of you being a part of this committee next year. When we have
Or council, that's fine too.
these additional
Just
questions,
saying.
yeah, still got till Friday at 5 p.m.
Right. A few more days.
All right,
It's easy.
let's move on to public comments.
Yeah.
John, do we have anybody online that wants to make a comment?
we do have one person watching. Susan is online if she wants to raise her hand.
She's still awake after all that. No, now she is.
Okay, Susan.
Not much.
Look at all those lovely faces right there. Okay, you got, I have a comment, question. I'm not sure whether I'm asking the right individual. So you stop me if I am, okay? I want to address something that my social media buddy, Mr. Pulver, mentioned in the meeting today. Yes, you're on the spot, bud.
When am I
Said,
not?
oh, and I'm not even your wife. And I want to know whether she was, because I heard that remark too. But anyway, concerning the leash law and loose dog situation, you mentioned that it was an HOA problem, and I want to tell you, my dear friend, it is certainly not. I
No, that was
walked,
from Mr. Bryan. That was a joke about his massive HOA thing that's up there in what's it called? Cove. So, yeah, no, that was not a actual real life thing because, yeah, HOA is not a governing body that can enforce leash laws per se. So,
wish they were. Could you come up here
I know.
and help them enforce their own rules?
yeah.
Anyway, I have a comment and a suggestion addressing that problem in North Ogden, but I'm not sure whether here is the place to do it or should I bring it up in city council?
City council would be the appropriate place.
Okay, that's all I needed to go. You guys need to scoot out of there and enjoy this beautiful day in North Ogden.
Thank you, Susan.
Have a good one.
Okay, Mayor, you're the only member of the public here.
I made enough comments.
Anything else you'd like to add to the meeting? Okay.
Good.
Let's, committee members. Good?
Yep.
Good, good. I have nothing. Scott? John?
Just sorry, I had to sneak out.
It's all right. Peter?
Happy to be here at the end of it all.
Glad to have you here at the end of it all. Councilman? Okay, we're adjourned then.
6 o'clock.